Let's shift gears and talk spring football. The OU spring game is set for 1:15 on Saturday in Norman. Barry, who are you looking forward to seeing in this game?
The kickers.
The kickers?
The kickers. Oh, you couldn't kick last year. Jimmy Stevens wasn't very consistent, and the only time they even let him try a long one is when Bob Stoops lost his head in Miami and tried a 48-yarder. So I want to see if
that happened.
Yeah, it really happened. But Tress Way, Bryce Easley's not even going to be there, the Norman North high school senior, but he'll be in the running in August. I want to see if Stevens and Tress Way, how they've progressed.
I'd like to see the offensive line and the wide receivers, to me, as groups are groups that I'm interested in seeing. Obviously, you lose a big chunk of that offensive line. What do they look like? How are guys progressing? I never know how much you can really gauge on the spring game, but still, to see those guys in action, what do they look like? And then receivers, another group that lost a good chunk of its production when it lost Iglesias and Manny Johnson. So who's stepping forward in that group? And some exciting young talent, I think, too, at the wide receiver position. What do they look like? How active are they, and how good are they? So those are the two main groups. I don't know if anybody in specific, but I just want to see how those two groups and those two cores are looking out there.
Don't need to see Sam Bradford. We know what he can do. You need to see who's behind him. And I want to see the defensive backs yelling at the linebackers in the huddle. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That was very interesting.
So that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Doesn't the Eric Mitchell Memorial Spring Game Sensation Award come down to these three guys, Landry Jones, Jeremy Calhoun, and Justin Johnson?
Well, Calhoun and Johnson very much so, because they're ballyhooed recruits and talented runners, but really no place for them with Murray and Brown and now Moses Madu even. So this is their chance to shine.
It's also Landry Jones with this big-time recruit coming from Wichita, committing to the Sooners. Blake Bell is his name, 6'6", a giant quarterback. And now Landry Jones, it's a little pressure on him to perform with this recruit coming in. I think it's going to be interesting to watch him. Let's talk about the spring game in Stillwater now. That's a week away. John, who's intriguing you there?
It's not even a player. It's the defensive coordinator, Bill Young, a familiar name. Where'd he go? U.S. Grant High School and OSU, and been an assistant at OU and OSU. And it's supposed to be, it's just simplified immensely up there at OSU. They've been thinking too much up there the last few years on defense. I want to see how well simplification works up at OSU.
Yeah, we had a story today. Scott Wright wrote about Brandon Whedon, one of the backup quarterbacks. I'm kind of curious to see how the backup quarterbacks do. They haven't had to really use those guys because Zach Robinson has stayed healthy, but the kind of game that he plays where he scrambles around, seems like it's unfortunately maybe only a matter of time before he gets his bell rung or maybe has some sort of injury and those guys need to come in. Brandon Whedon's interesting, 25-year-old sophomore. Alex Cade, a guy that's been in the background for a long time. So I'd kind of like to see how those guys perform and what they bring to the table.
I think the biggest question mark for OSU is at receiver. And so I've got my eye on Hubert Anium. He's been a guy that's come in 2 years ago and I thought was a pretty good prospect, but not a lot of balls going around. OSU is sort of a one receiver-centric team the last few years. But with Dominic Davis moving on down the road, they need somebody to fill in that number 2 position, and I think it could be Anium.
Our man Scott Wright is intrigued by Justin Blackman, the receiver from Plainview. I'm going to go with that. I think, like you said, Barry, they need some help on the other side of Dez Bryant. Now, Scott didn't quite say he's another Dez Bryant, but he says he has some skills like him, and he has really impressed people in Stillwater. I'm going to go with that guy, but I'll go also with John. I think Bill Young has a chance to sort of revolutionize defense at OSU. We've been talking about, when's the last time they had a really good defense in Stillwater? Well, they played it well when Bill Young was coaching up there. He can simplify things. And also, didn't he also coach at USC and like Notre Dame Miami? He's been everywhere. He knows
Kansas
Kansas, yeah.
Look at that recent history at Kansas, what they did with guys that, they weren't cast-offs, but not sort of that high-caliber guys. They played great defense that year. Didn't make a lot of mistakes, forced the other team into mistakes. I think there's definitely a chance under him to see some great improvement with that defense.
With a bunch of Oklahoma kids that Kansas team played. So Bill Young, intriguing there.